Hello. Just going to let all you fine folks into the room. Perfect. So I'm hoping we can start maybe in a minute, but in the meantime, get cozy, get comfortable, pen and paper out. We have a lot to share tonight, and hopefully everyone's looking forward to it as much as we are. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you from? What part of the process you're in? What brings you here tonight? We want to hear from you. Let us know in the chat. In the meantime, Leslie, Catherine, you can hear me, see me all right?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. Awesome. I think we'll get started in less than a minute. I feel like I should have some background music, but that's something I forget every single time.
Like the waiting music on a phone call when you're on hold.
Yep. Or maybe something associated with animals. I think every one of these calls should have its own jingle.
A jingle.
At least a mascot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although we have a nice logo, so I guess that's our mascot. Okay, so it's a couple minutes past. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so I'd love to get going. Like I said earlier, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are in Spear Advantage. Tonight's webinar is called Preparing for Vet School Interviews. So a little bit about what we're looking at, what conversations we're having tonight. We'll be speaking about effective interview strategies. We'll speak about MMI and panel interviews, questions, how to improve your interview performance, how to stand out from competition, and a Q&A. So what does tonight's webinar look like? Well, we're looking at running tonight's webinar for about 45 minutes. We're hoping to have about a 30-minute conversation where our two panelists, who will be introducing themselves momentarily, will speak to you and share all the wonderful insights that they have. And then towards the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for a Q&A. This webinar is recorded, so you will receive a recording in your inbox. We encourage you to rewatch it, share it, and of course, get back to us with any sort of questions, comments, concerns that you may have. Now, a little bit about who we are, whether you've been on one of our webinars before or this is your first time. We're super excited to have you here, and thank you for taking the time out of your day. So who's in Spear Advantage, and what makes us credible enough? What gives us the opportunity to even speak to you? Well, Spear Advantage is a globally recognized admissions consulting firm and test prep firm with over 15 years of experience. We specialize in guiding students through the complex and competitive process of applying to graduate schools in healthcare fields, including veterinary, medical, residency, dental, and physician assistants, as well as nursing programs. With a 94% acceptance rate, we maximize an applicant's chances of getting accepted into the world's most competitive programs. Overall, our goal is to build the most competitive candidate and, of course, application. We use every tool in our skill set to ensure that the products we create with our students stand out from the rest of the pack. With that being said, and I know you're not here to have me blabber on about who we are, I'd love to pass it over to Leslie and Catherine to introduce themselves before going forward with the rest of the presentation.
I'll start. Hey guys, Dr. Leslie Starnes. You can just call me Leslie. I'm cool with that. I graduated from Auburn University back in 2017. So I was just telling Catherine a little bit of my background. I primarily practice small animal, little bit of dabble in, exotics and such, but mainly practice small animal urgent care and emergency medicine. And then I also teach at a vet tech program here where I live. I'm based out of West Virginia now. I also dabble in lab animal medicine, and I got call them my hobby jobs, right? Because vet med is so broad and exciting. But that's enough about me. Let's hear about Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Aronson. I'm currently a third-year vet student at Iowa State. So I finished my bachelor's at the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma. I was bio pre-med. I always knew I wanted to do vet school, but I did pre-med anyways, just to be a little bit on the safe side. And then I took a gap year. I worked kind of in the industry and business side of vet med, which gave me a really unique perspective. And I kind of found a love for business. And then now I'm obviously going through vet school, and I'm loving working with Inspira on the side. It's been very, very rewarding because I love being able to help people such as yourselves, because I was in your position not too long ago, and it can be a tough one, but we all get through it, and so we all. So. So we can start out a little bit today. As mentioned before, this is going to be more of like a conversation type thing. So yeah, we have these slides to present, but we'll be sharing a little bit more of like our personal experience and examples and things like that. So just kind of starting off, interviews are super important in vet school admissions because it allows you to be more than just an application or something on paper. So you get to showcase exactly who you are as an applicant, who you are as a person, your personality, and why, honestly, you would be a strong veterinarian later on in your career. And a lot of that is really based on the impression that you make. The majority of vet schools do have interviews. There's really only a few that don't. Some of them are virtual. Some of them are MMI format. We'll get into that later. Some of them are just like face-to-face standard interviews. But regardless, they're all looking for you to demonstrate who you are beyond your statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, I've got toddlers who are escaping from their bedroom as we begin to talk the webinar. Anyhow, just being able to show more of who you are outside of paper, right? So they're learning about you from your VMCAS application, which you can tell a lot about yourself, but really getting to know you as a person, right? It's just a one step closer. So seeing if you're the right fit for their school, and if you fit in with them too. You're interviewing them a little bit as well. But I agree with everything Catherine said.
And then we'll talk about some effective interview strategies here. So common questions. I always like to say that you really don't need to like prepare for interviews in a sense. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that as we go on. You don't want to go to some of these websites. Like, I know there are Reddit threads out there. I know that they're like Quizlet flashcards. And some people will say, oh yeah, just memorize answers to a bunch of these, top 50 asked questions. That is a huge waste of your time. You have no idea what kind of questions these schools are going to ask. And if you try to memorize certain answers, you will come off as robotic and not authentic, which is honestly what they're looking more for. Like, they want to know that you can, one, think on your feet, you can have empathetic and knowledgeable and just like professional answers, you can communicate normally like in a stressful situation, because all of those really important communication skills are absolutely essential to be a successful veterinarian. So they're kind of testing you in this stressful environment to see, hey, does this person have the communication skills or just the basis of them that we can then build off of in vet school? Because yes, you do take communication courses in vet school so that you can be an effective veterinarian. So at one sense, you don't want to spend all this time like trying to memorize responses to answers, but you can still prepare yourself by like brainstorming just general answers to commonly asked questions, like, why do you want to be a vet? Typical things that you will probably be asked, and just get in that right headspace to know that, or I guess more so practice being able to give a response at the drop of a hat, like with a friend or with an inspired counselor such as myself.
Absolutely. She's hitting the nail on the head. I say the exact same thing about, you don't want to come across as a robot. They're not interested in interviewing a robot. They're interested in getting to know you for that 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour, whatever, however long the interview is. They want to know you. And I mean, that sounds like a little corny and a little cliche, but it's true. They want to see that you can think critically, that you can think on your feet. And I know that seems stressful, right? it stresses me a little bit even. I don't like to be wrong, but guess what? You're human. They want to be able to see that human side of you. I can give a very specific example now. I did a practice interview with, it was one of the like big hospital corporations. I don't even remember. Maybe it was Blue Pearl. They came to our school when I was in clinics, and I was like, yeah, I'll practice. Like, I didn't really want to work for them, but I went ahead and practiced. And they, I remember, asked me something to the extent of like, all right, Fluffy just came in for whatever reason and did full blood work, and the blood work came back normal. And what were you able to communicate to the owner about their dog being sick after that? And guys, I was floored. I was like, right? I mean, I just like really stumbled through it. And ultimately, like the answer they gave me in the feedback was like, you can tell them that the liver's working, and you can tell them Fluffy's kidneys look okay, and you can tell them that the blood sugar is normal, and just like thanks. And I tell you what, as a practitioner today, something I learned in a vet school fake interview, like a mock interview for a job, right? But still, it's something that I like carry just daily. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can just tell them what I know. So you can tell them answers. You may not know the exact answer that they're asking for. I mean, maybe it's something specific, like they ask you, what are common vaccines that you would give to horses? Maybe you don't know. Maybe you've never touched a horse in your life. But you could say, I'm not exactly sure, but I could tell you what I do know. I wish I could talk to you a little bit about what I've seen in my experience in small animal practice, what they give to dogs, right? You can always say something. And that's my advice is, you don't have to like make something up. Don't lie. We're going to talk about being critically honest later. That's more advice I'll give you. But yes, I just want to just emphasize absolutely what Catherine said. What we want you to be yourself, and they want you to be yourself. They don't want a robot. They're not interested in that. They know the right answer, guys. Right? So like they're just wanting to see you come through with whatever you can say to them. Okay. I think that pretty well hits on that. So I'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. All right, so it kind of feeds in, but communicating your passion. So you guys, everyone has a unique experience, right? Even if you and your best friend are both applying to vet school and you went to college together and you volunteered at the same exact clinic or whatever, I can guarantee you that there are going to be differences about how you even perceive just like day-to-day cases, right? So everyone has a unique backstory, perspective, whatever, that they can bring in. Here, you go ahead, and Catherine, you go ahead and take.
Yeah, sure thing. And then another thing you definitely want to talk about is connecting to your future goals. So a lot of times they'll ask questions that focus on all three aspects of who you are as a person. They might ask you some questions about your past self, your experiences, some of the things you talked about in your interview or your application, which, to just clarify for some people probably wondering, there's two different types of interviews. There's blind and then there's not blind interviews. You can't really tell what school does what. Just know that some schools will have the blind interview where they are going to interview you and they have not looked at your application whatsoever. So they literally do not know anything about you. And then there's the not blind where they have actually looked over your application and they kind of know a bit about you. But I always say that it's good to talk completely, just assuming that they don't know anything about you. So feel free to repeat the stuff on your application. In fact, that's probably what you're going to want to talk about when they ask you about past or present experiences. So they'll probably ask you some past questions. They'll probably ask you some present experiences, what you're planning on doing currently as you're applying for vet school. Are you finishing up your last year? Are you taking a gap year? If so, what are you going to do with that time? And then they're also going to ask you about your future experiences. So how do you see yourself in vet school type questions, or even further, like where do you want to take your career? And so just getting a generalized idea of what you want to do in the future, but at the same time, you don't need to make a decision right this second before you've even started vet school. I remember being asked in every single interview that I did, like, what do you want to do when you get out of vet school? And I very honestly was like, so I spent the majority of my working hours in a clinic doing small animal and exotics. And I was so sure that is all I would ever want to practice. And right before I had my vet school applications, I decided to diversify my application a bit and do an equine hospital internship, knowing that I liked horses, but I had no experience with them other than maybe riding a horse once. And I ended up falling in love with that internship. I had such a good experience. I loved the adrenaline rush that comes with working with equine emergencies. And so anyways, that being said, I went into this interview and said, I spent my whole life thinking that I was going to do small animal and exotics. And then I just tried working with horses and I loved it. And now I'm thinking I want mixed animal. So who's to say that I'm going to get into vet school and fall in love with production animal medicine or like swine medicine, and then I'm going to completely change what I want to do? That's okay for you to say that, but kind of like what Leslie was talking about, it's all about the way you spin your answer. So even if you maybe like don't know an answer to something, you can spin it around in a positive way. And likewise with that, you don't want to sit there and be like, oh, I don't really know. Like there's so many species. I haven't had a lot of experience. You can spin it positively and say, I'm really excited to broaden my horizon in vet school and see where that may end up leading me. I see myself doing this right now, but I'm open to other experiences, which is actually ultimately what they want to hear. No one goes into vet school and then remains completely unchanged by the end of it. So
such wise words, and it almost feels like a double-edged sword. Like it's so good to come in with an open mind, and be able to say, this is what I think I want to do, but I'm so excited to meet these new opportunities. And I had, that was the exact experience I had too. I thought I had my mind made up, and then even in interviews with, was able to talk through some things that I liked, and they were like, well, you just never know. And being able to have that open mind, and like it really does, it shows a little bit of maturity that you can say that instead of just like, nope, I'm going to be an equine vet, that's what I'm doing, that's what I've always known, that's what I will always do. They actually find that a little bit like it can be a turn off, is what I've heard.
yeah, I would agree with that. I've heard the same. So I think we can, move to this next slide here. So we'll start a little bit about the MMI. So the MMI format is basically like it literally stands for multiple mini interviews. And so there are usually different stations or different rooms, and there's different people in each of those rooms. And each of those rooms has a different prompt. And they're still usually typical interview questions. They're not spending their time in any sort of pre-vet school interview really asking you like medical grade questions. Obviously, you don't know any of that yet, so don't panic, but you'll go in, and there's definitely the advantage of an MMI that allows you to essentially start fresh with new graders for every single question, which is, definitely a benefit. Like maybe one question you just really like botched the answer, you got really nervous and didn't know what to say. Well, now you have a fresh start in the next station. However, it also means that you have to really make every single question and answer count, because obviously you're creating an entirely new impression and you only have a couple of minutes to do that with each station. So there are definitely pros and cons to MMIs, but that's like the general format. And the biggest takeaway that we have for you is to like stay calm under the pressure. That's good for MMIs or just general interviews. And like we've both kind of alluded to earlier, this interview is almost like a test for how well you can perform under pressure, because being a veterinarian means communicating well under pressure, whether to your staff or to a client. So it's very important to be able to have those communication skills and be able to stay calm under pressure.
These will be exhausting to you. Let me just put that warning out to you, but that doesn't mean you can't rock it. I think you described it perfectly, Catherine. It feels like these random scenarios, but they're really just aimed at like critical thinking. You're going to more than likely have one or two of the sessions that feels like, oh my gosh, I just botched that. Start over fresh every time. Like just flush it and move on. You can think about it and overanalyze yourself later, right? That's what we do as type A's. But the key to success genuinely is to just go in every room like you weren't just in another interview. Just move forward and don't get flustered enough to like start making something up. They're gonna read through that. Like try your best. If you absolutely get like just gridlocked, like my goodness, I can't think, just take a deep breath and say that I'm just trying to think right now. I need a moment, right? And that it shows the maturity, right? So don't fluster too much, because I remember getting flustered in one of mine, and I think I started going down a trail of like sort of making something up, and I was like, oh, I need to restart. I really did. I got into that school. Like it wasn't a fatal flaw. Apparently it felt like it at the moment. I look back and I'm like, wow. But anyhow, just learning to regroup and move forward and trying your best to just think and give a real life pertinent example that you have experienced, right? They're wanting to learn about you. They don't necessarily want to hear about your brother or your relative. Like, give something that means something to you and something that like you have passion about, if you can. I mean, for instance, I had a question I still remember about the Olympics, and they asked if you could remove any sport from the Olympics, and they gave a list of like fake sports, and which one would it be? And I was like, whoa, what? Right? Like, that doesn't have anything to do with anything, but they really just wanted me to pick something and be able to like justify it. And I mean, I can talk to a rock, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but I remember that. I also recall a question about what I felt like the biggest piece of technological advancement was in the past like 20 years or something. Anyway, we can talk more about like the like nuances when we have just our like open conversation at the end. But if you want to know like questions, I'm sure Catherine is a lot closer than I am. She's going to remember very specific things. We can talk to you guys about like specific schools you have interest in, whatever. But I'll go forward for now, but just stay calm and move forward. That's going to be your best advice there. Now that I've evaded my toddlers, I've literally moved from room to room. I'm so sorry about that. They mean well, but they're supposed to be asleep and they escaped. And yeah, it's just not going well. I feel bad for my husband, but let's talk about the panel interviews. So when you're sitting in front of a group of people, so we're not necessarily talking about the MMI format now, like this is kind of moving into talking about a panel. So multiple people asking you questions. They may be playing good cop, bad cop with you. They may be just asking you straight up, like she mentioned, about straight from your resume, straight from your application. They may not even know about you. They may come in blinded, which I think is fascinating. I didn't experience that, but I know it does exist. But anyhow, you're sitting in like kind of what you would expect, like usually across the table from these people. You want to come in politely, but you want to make eye contact, and don't just like stare at the wall behind them. That would be awkward, right? Don't overthink. Oh, sorry. Don't overthink too much about that eye contact, though, right? Just like try to have a casual conversation. You're just talking to someone, telling them about yourself. So not trying to just like stare at each one into their soul and bouncing back and forth and like panicking about that, right? But body language is important, right? We don't want to walk in and cross our arms and like, I think as women, sometimes we like to make ourselves small and well, I guess anybody could make that, but notoriously. So maybe uncross your legs, maybe just sit with your upright posture, confident, open arms, something like that, but don't just try to make yourself tiny, right? So introducing yourself, but anyhow, moving forward, listening, trying not to ramble as best you can, and just maintaining contact with that first probably person that talks to you. So on a panel, typically someone will ask you a question, and then another interviewer may feed off of that. It just kind of depends how it goes. But it would be more like what you would expect out of like a traditional interview. That's what a panel is.
Yeah, and the only thing that I really have to add, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, is professionalism. So really, especially with the panel interviews, but really any interview in general, even a virtual interview, you want to treat that like this is one of the most important meetings of your life or your career, and therefore you should dress as such and give them the respect that they're giving you to offer you this interview. Making it to the interview stage is such a huge next step, because when you think about the numbers in like vet med applications, they literally have thousands of applications. I'm talking like upwards of 9,000 applications usually in total for all the vet schools. And basically with all thousands of those applicants, they will narrow it down to like 400-ish per school for interviews. That already is a huge cut. And then on top of that, they're going from like the 400 or whatever to 100 to 150 seats per school. It varies for who they're actually offering admission to. That's why the interview is like such a big deal. So you want to show that respect, that they're taking their time to offer you this interview. And that being said, make sure that you're very polished going in your appearance, things like that. Now, they won't necessarily grade you on professionalism per se, but how you portray yourself professionally, the way you're like dressed, the way you act, that makes a significant impact on how they honestly view your answers and how they will overall view you as a potential future veterinarian. Because as a future veterinarian, you are a doctor. You are going to be a very like professional individual. So again, just like communication, they want to know that you have that baseline level before you even started vet school.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Awesome. So when it comes to personalizing like your interview preparation, so I know we already said you don't want to like try to prepare answers or examples or whatever, but what I do definitely recommend as well is to look into each school's values, kind of like what they're known for. You know, some schools have a really strong exotics program, or some schools are like, they have the 2+2 programs. So they really value those clinical experiences as early as possible. Before you go into each interview, just get familiar with what that vet school's kind of claim to fame is and what you could tell they really care about, like in their mission statement. Because I can almost guarantee you will be asked at every single school, they will ask you something like, why did you apply to this school? And the last thing you want to do is be like, oh, well, I just applied to every vet school, which low key, we all know that everyone just applies to every vet school. Everyone knows that you cast a really wide net. But what they're looking for is for you to turn around and say, like, I was really attracted to your program specifically for A, B, and C reason. So there's that portion. And that kind of ties into then knowing what kind of skills that you possess that can match that mission statement, because then you're showing that you are a good match for them the same way that they are a good match for you. And then the other tip we have is practice makes perfect. So that's where like the mock interviews come in. And the mock interviews aren't for you to, like I said, memorize answers to really likely asked questions. It's for you to refine your communication skills, refine your skills on thinking on the spot and being able to come up with a creative answer in 10 seconds or less, or whatever it's going to be. And it will also allow someone else to give you feedback, and then you know what you need to work on before you do your actual interviews.
And if you're in an undergraduate program right now, or a master's program, anything, if you have a pre-veterinary club, a lot of pre-veterinary clubs will do mock interviews. But if not, that's literally our job. So there's people like us. But also if you're out in a clinic getting experience right now, I know that, you just likely submitted your application if you're applying this cycle, but you're probably still in a clinic. Ask the staff to help you. The veterinarian that you're working for has gone through veterinary school, and even if they're a lot older, they probably still have some ability to help set up a mock interview for you. There are people that are going to want to support you. It's such a tight-knit profession. I think if you haven't found, my experience has been like a lot of people really like to mentor all ages, from getting into vet school, for those interested when they're in high school, blah, 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 all the way up. So if you don't, have anybody, like I said, hey, we're here. But also think about trying to get some help, and even just from a friend, right? You can find prompts and stuff online.
Yeah.
So let's talk about questions. I saw, Casey, you had asked some specifics about schools, and at the end we can talk about, I can definitely apply to a couple of those schools, and I've worked with some students, and we can kind of talk through that. But for now, let's just talk about some basic questions. So some of the ones that we have listed here. So why do you want to pursue veterinary medicine? Catherine already mentioned that. Have your why, right? There needs to be not just again, with the school, I liked the architecture of the fountain out front. No, right? You need to have a reason. Maybe you research the mission statement. Maybe you have a relative that went there. Maybe it's close to home and geographically that's important to you. You have a support system. Have your why and know it before you get there, right? But why do you want to be a veterinarian? Obviously, that's an important question, right? And maybe it's because you've said you wanted to be one since you were able to talk, but you need to know a little bit more than that, right? That there needs to be a real, the when that became a reality for you, when you realized in college or whatever, when you were working at a clinic, that it was more than just playing with puppies and kittens. Have a true, just know your why and own it, and be able to own it, and you're going to be fine. I promise you. Because if you truly have a why, you already have that passion. You just need to be able to have that preform. That's a thought every experience, anything you wrote about in your VMCAS, you need to have that's easy, and that is free, free flowing knowledge that should be second nature to you. Like, you should be able to fill in any type of a question they ask. You can pull from that. It's totally cool, like Catherine said, to talk about your experiences. They probably want to know about them. Honestly, you only have so much room on there to talk about it. Like, be able to go into more detail about it. And if you can't, just repeat it. It's okay. Even just being able to hear you talk about it versus just reading about it on a paper is going to be helpful. And then again, knowing that your experiences make you unique, right? Even if you have the similar background as so many other people, just know that you as a person can make that unique. And so just don't be afraid that you're boring. All right. Don't try to be flashy and showy and flowery language. They're not looking for that. They're looking for professionalism and just getting to know you as a person. In my interview that ultimately at Auburn, where I chose to go to school, and why truly the interview went so personal for me, we talked a lot about running because they wanted to know. I was a big hobby for me and I ran collegiately. We talked about running. We didn't talk about veterinary medicine mainly. And it made such an impact on me that I actually chose to go to that school because I connected so much with one of the interviewers. So again, it's a little bit of you're interviewing them as well. So maybe that will help you calm down if you're nervous in the moment.
And the only real thing I have to add to that is knowing your why will also literally carry you through your career. So you may discover more of your why as you're going through vet school, as you're going through your career. But at least at Iowa State, they are literally always telling us, our professors are after that really hard test, remember your why. Or when you just studied 12 hours straight on a Saturday when you would have wanted to do anything else, remember your why. And on some of my literally lowest days, I remember that why. Or when I get to work with patients and I get that refresher, it makes a world of difference, because it makes everything that you're going through and everything y'all are going through right now with the difficulties and applications so worth it. There's a bigger picture. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It just takes a lot to get there.
Yeah. That jog, yeah, that's so good. That's super good. And just as a practitioner now, and dealing with people, and sometimes people are hard, right? So good to remember that and be able to just cling to that. One other thing I was just thinking about, if they ask you a question that is, there's probably a term, but a negative connotation, what is your biggest weakness? That's, I don't know, I'll call it, that's a hard question, right? What is something you don't feel confident in? What is blah, blah, blah? Something that's kind of making you kind of pull out a little bit of a negative side. Be able to try to think of that in advance if you can. Have an answer already for what's your weakness. That is an easy question that's really common. I totally remember being asked that. Be able to think of something that you can spin off into a positive if you can. So don't just say oh, I'm too nice.
Yeah.
I don't mean that.
My grades are just too good.
My grades are just too good. I'm too perfect. That's not at all what I mean. You can talk about something you're nervous about, but what you've done to kind of, or maybe you are really shy or it's given you more empathy for people who are quiet and shy, something like that. Just be able to spin it if you can into a positive. So I want you all to be thinking about what you think your biggest weakness is and how you can spin that into a positive.
So I will quickly pop in. I know we have a ton of questions. We have a ton of questions in the chat. I think we'll save them towards the end though, because I just want to be mindful of time again. But really great question. Somebody had asked you to speak on the experiences with a couple of universities. We'll try our best to answer as thoroughly as we can based off of our knowledge. And then somebody had asked us about being asked a very particular and difficult question and how we would go about responding to that. But we will again get back to those towards the end of the conversation.
Okay. That's a great segue to this next slide, handling difficult questions. So I think we've touched on this quite a few times, but can we go ahead and use I think that it's okay to go ahead and Casey, your question about euthanasia. I did want to, is it okay? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I thought
absolutely.
that it was a good time to kind of, just because we've sort of talked about how to like compose yourself, because you're going to have a question you don't immediately know an answer to, guys. So my advice there, and their advice as well as Kat, is just to breathe and know that you're a human being and you're not perfect, and no one's looking for perfection. They don't want to see you freak out and start crying because you don't know the answer. All right. And maybe ultimately, like, let's say worst case scenario, you can't think of the answer, or you just cannot, for whatever reason, you're just mind blocked, that you can show that you can get through that. Okay. But that's, again, worst case scenario. Hopefully you can come up with something, but don't make something up. You want to be honest and just try your best. Do your best. Radical honesty is so important. Like, they're gonna see through you if you try to flubber and make something up. Specifically though, Casey's question, I'm gonna just read it back. It says, how likely is it that they will bring up euthanasia, and what's the best way to go about answering a question like that? So I do need to ask, I guess I would like for you to maybe let me just say, can you tell me specifically what you mean? What kind of a question about euthanasia? Like, do you agree with euthanasia, or like, what are your thoughts on euthanasia, or how do you feel like you're going to handle euthanasia? I'm happy to talk to you all of those, but go ahead, Casey, if you will put that more specific in the comments, and we'll come back to that when it's question time.
And kind of building off a little bit of what Leslie said. So it is super important that you show that like professionalism and being able to think on your feet. But at the same time, exactly like she said, we are human, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them asking a really difficult question and you literally saying, that's a difficult question. I'd like to think on that for just a second before I answer. And then literally giving yourself like a 15-second pause. You do not need to feel like you need to immediately spit something out. In fact, taking a step back and like showing that you're going to reflect before you just word vomit out something also shows maturity. So that's totally
Confidence.
okay. And confidence. Exactly. That's totally okay to take a second to think through a difficult question or a difficult answer. They probably will throw you like a curveball or two. It may be a really deep question, or it may be like a controversial topic on vet med. I always coach like my advisees to kind of like get a little bit up to date with the big headlines in vet med news. And you don't need to get like super up to date on current events or specific, but just like in general, maybe like know what One Health is, because I remember being asked that and I was like, I'm so grateful that I just happened to peruse some headlines about what One Health initiative is and how veterinary medicine ties into One Health, which is like a whole global initiative. So in those situations, yeah, it's going to be great if you did know the answer, but if they ask some curveball technical question that you just like genuinely don't know, it is okay to be like, I'm actually not familiar with that topic. Could you elaborate on it a little bit further? And maybe they'll explain it a little bit more, and then you can give an opinion. Never hurts to ask.
Agreed. Yeah, that's great. Right. So back to MMI a little bit, I guess. So we kind of already spoke on this, but I guess we can kind of glaze over it a little bit more. So I know Virginia, Maryland. So Casey, that was one of your no, not Casey, Johanna, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, Johanna, I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Both names are pretty, either way. But you said Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia, Maryland does utilize the MMI. So many interviews, right? Again, problem solving, that is really what it's about, to see that you can handle a little bit of stress under pressure. There may be some ethical scenario. Well, there will be some ethical scenarios. So like, how do you tell a client that their animal might need to be euthanized is definitely an ethical situation. And then also just like, how do you relay that well? That's it. It's not anything like mysterious and scary. It's just like having multiple small interviews at one time, and you're going around from like room to room, and it is stressful. I will not lie. But it's kind of cool, and again, it's just restarting every time. That's, I think, was the biggest takeaway that I had.
And for those of you that are familiar with the Casper exam, I found that a lot of schools that do the Casper like don't do the MMIs because the Casper is almost like a virtual form of an MMI. It's a situational judgment exam. So for those of you that have taken that for other schools, you'll be a little bit more familiar with the MMI format. But yeah, some of the stations, they will ask you questions about yourself, like a traditional interview, but then some of them will be like those situational judgment exams. So usually they're like ethical based issues or commonly faced problems or difficult scenarios or conversations that you might have as a veterinarian and how you would deal with that. And a lot of that isn't finding the right answer because there is no right answer. They want to see like your baseline ethics, like your morality, just kind of like what your values are as a person. And if that aligns with the type of student they want and the type of veterinarian they want to cultivate, basically. So just be honest.
Radical honesty. All right. Receiving and implementing feedback. So I told you guys already about the example of the feedback I had. And it was an interview for like a fake job, but still, I mean, it fits. If you happen to get that question that you just don't know anything about, like you kind of mentioned the One Health or right now, like, gosh, you guys can get on the AVMA's website, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and they will have hot topics right now. You can
just go there.
Just go there. Yeah. But that is, you can actually sign up. They email me all the time. Honestly, it's too much. I don't always read them, but like just today, for instance, there's this debate about, creating a mid-level practitioner. So like the equivalent of a nurse practitioner in Colorado right now. And it's been, the AVMA is against it for numerous reasons. We don't have to get into all that, but like, if you have never heard of that, you know what a nurse practitioner is, right? Maybe you could grab one to some kind of a foothold. But let's say that you absolutely have never heard of that in your entire life. You don't even understand what a mid-level practitioner is, and they're not giving you anything. Have enough like confidence to say, you know what? I'm gonna make sure I look that up after this interview, right? Like again, like just try to say something, even if it feels like, gosh, I blew that. Embrace constructive criticism. If they're able to, like I was able to meet with my interviewers from Mississippi State after my interview, and that was so helpful because they were able to give me criticism, constructive feedback about how I just needed to be more confident and blah, blah, blah. But if you're able to practice again, like getting feedback from someone who you're able to do a mock interview with is so vital. It really is. It's super helpful. I think that's why you're all here tonight, right? Is to get some kind of help before just going into it, not going into it blindly.
And here's the thing about vet school. It is an incredibly humbling experience. I waffle every day between a God complex or feeling really stupid. I'm not going to lie to you guys. So that's the thing is like you will always not be able to know everything. Like it doesn't matter how advanced in your career. I have professors that are literally 80 years old, and I'm not joking when I say 80 years old. And they even are like, I practiced for 30 years. I've been a professor for 20. And there's still things that I don't know or that like I don't fully understand. And that's the great but also terrible thing about medicine is you have to accept that you are not going to be able to know everything and you're not going to be perfect at everything. And honestly, being able to take constructive criticism and not like be super offended or hurt by it, that it's not a reflection of you as a person, that is so critical to have as a skill to be a veterinarian. You're going to have to take feedback your entire career and not take it personally. So it's good to start with that now.
Agreed. Forever humbled.
Every day, man, every day.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, I can go a little bit.
No, I'm just reading to see what this is saying. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. So some insights from admissions committee members, basically like feedback that we have gotten from admissions committee members at a variety of different schools. So also just to keep in mind, there's not one size fits all for who will be interviewing you. Sometimes schools bring in their alumni that are like current practicing veterinarians, and that's the extent of what they do. Sometimes they're like actual admissions committees within the faculty or like the admin office of a vet college. Sometimes they are like veterinarians that just signed up to be a part of this. So it's not like every single person that interviews you is going to either be like, one, a practicing veterinarian, or like two, part of some admissions committee, or like a faculty at a vet college. So just know that in general, the only thing that they all have in common is that they're veterinarians and that they want to bring solid candidates to the profession. So they deeply, deeply care about the future of the profession. That being said, they have a variety of opinions on what the future of the profession should look like. And yes, they're going to have a grading rubric, but ultimately they are also then in turn going to be advocating for why you deserve a spot in, narrowing this list of 500 interviews to 100 seats type of thing. So what they want to see is candidates that demonstrate genuine passion, purpose, preparedness. And not preparedness, like we said, not memorizing answers, but just preparedness that you took a second to know about the school and know about your own future. They value clear communication, thoughtful, reflective answers. Like we said, you can take a step back if you need to for a reflective answer. And then sharing a growth mindset. Again, what we've talked about, that you understand that some of your goals may shift as you go through your veterinary career, and that's okay, that you have an open mindset, because like Leslie mentioned, no one wants someone that's very rigid going into it, because you do grow a lot and you do change a lot. Who I am now is not who I was before I started vet school. And I probably will be slightly different too, even when I graduate in a couple years.
And know that these people, even if they are practitioners, like just used for the interviews, or if they're actual faculty, know that they have gone through trainings to help them not be biased. Like, obviously we all have bias as human beings, that like it's part of it, but know that they have gone through like trying to weed that out a little bit. So just, that's something that maybe would give me a little bit of like peace, just kind of something to think about. But yeah, she hit all the points. That was like, my brain wasn't computing for a minute. But also, again, just like, I don't know, I always had this fear that like, oh gosh, they're way above me, they're so smart, and yes, I want to be a colleague, but I'm way down here on this totem pole. But that's not always the right mentality. Like, coming into this is like just people to talk to across the table, right? So having that like calm confidence, not arrogance, right? There's a line we walk, but just having a calm confidence to talk about yourself in a way that you're able to show yourself, just let your light shine. I think we're kind of the term beating a dead horse is really, really not tasteful, but it is maybe accurate. We're kind of
hitting questions too and stuff like that. So I mean, we kind of touched on these top 3 ways.
Yeah. So I think we'll keep scooting on, because I definitely want to. This is silly and goes without saying, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Eat before your interview, please. You do not want to go in and feel like you're going to pass out. You don't need to be, like you're already going to be sweaty a little bit, but just make sure you eat. Make sure if you need to, like, phone your mom or whatever, do things that make you as best you can, like, calm. Some of the interview places or some of the vet schools will have like therapy dogs come, which I think is awesome. But they don't all have that. So just trying to, if it's breathing, if it's like mindfulness, whatever you need to do, just try your best to remain calm, because you want to be able to think. And if you're freaking out, you're not going to be able to think as well.
Avoid caffeine the morning of. Yeah. You might feel tired, just don't do it.
Yeah, you're going to have adrenaline, and you don't want to be like crazy and on adrenaline. Adrenaline and caffeine don't always mix.
Not a great combo.
Oh, this is just saying, arrive early, bring copies of your resume. It's good to have like a little folder or a binder. It's always good to have that. I never used it, but I always had it, and it made me feel good to have like something in my hand, right? Like I was prepared.
And it kind of makes you that extra edge of professional, like I'm walking in with my briefcase or my folio or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. Yep, that's good.
Just kind of about like reflecting and following up. So this is kind of like what Leslie was saying. So it is a good thing to always like follow up. Now, sometimes if you have the opportunity to ask the school if you can write a thank you note to your interviewers, they will give you that information. Sometimes they won't. Confidentiality purposes, they won't even like give out the name of your interviewers. Regardless, it's always good to reach out to the school and send whether email or at a minimum an email or a thank you card like in the mail to thank them for extending that invite to you. That definitely can go a long way. Being okay with receiving that feedback, whether or not you get in that cycle, is just good to know. And one thing too that wasn't in the slide, but kind of final interview tip, always come prepared with like 2 or 3 questions that you want to ask them. I can almost guarantee you that they are going to leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end and they're going to hit you with the, what questions do you have for us? Or what questions do you have about our program? And if you sit there and you're like, oh, I actually like don't have any. No, don't do that. They want you to have questions prepared because just like Leslie has mentioned, you are also interviewing them. And if you come with thoughtful, pre-prepared questions, that goes a very long way. So.
Absolutely. All right, let's try to hit a couple of these questions. Is that okay? Is that good to do? We have a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. Keep on going.
Cool. I would like to hit Casey's question real quick and we'll kind of work our way up because Johanna's your question, it's gonna be a little lengthier. So how to handle telling a patient's family that euthanasia might be recommended. So how would we like say that in an interview? That is one of those ethical questions that could come up. They may just even like ask you your general, like how would you handle. So I would just say, I mean, truthfully, like draw on an experience you have. Well, I've worked at Storybook Vet Clinic, and the doctor I've worked for does such an amazing job at communicating when that animal is suffering. And, you know, as an animal advocate, as a veterinarian, I believe that I'm going to be able to do a good job because I've seen that good job modeled to me in the clinic, and just like using your experience to show it. Because you've never had to euthanize anything before, I would imagine, unless you happen to be a technician who has that certification, but you more than likely haven't, right? So just drawing from what you've seen and just trying to like say that empathetically. That's how I would go about that question personally. Does that answer, hopefully?
And just to kind of like a little bit piggyback off of that, sometimes when they ask those questions, again, like we mentioned before, there isn't a right answer that they're looking for. They just want to like genuinely know how you would respond in these certain difficult situations, because there are situations you would encounter as a veterinarian. And if you've shadowed at any clinic that even has multiple vets or at multiple clinics, you know everyone kind of has a different approach. So as long as you're basically like showcasing that you have those general values that all veterinarians share, like Leslie said, empathy is a huge one. Just being able to communicate well, be sympathetic to someone's situation, and gently talk through and gently explain difficult diagnoses or, you know, a difficult prognosis for a patient, not even just euthanasia, goes a very long way.
Speaking to the specific schools, you're welcome, Casey. We're glad to help. Speaking to the specific schools, I only applied to these southerny schools, but I had successful interviews and was offered admission at Mississippi State and Virginia, Maryland. So two different. Virginia, Maryland does MMI, and then Mississippi State was a very traditional panel interview for me, and it was actually my very first interview, and I was scared senseless, but it went well. Every school is going to kind of have a different I kind of like a feel, like a vibe is the word, right? And Mississippi State is like the epitome of Southern. Like they're just so laid back. So I don't know why I was scared, but I think probably because it was my first interview. But anyway, that panel interview there for me personally, they asked me, I definitely remember being asked what my top weakness was. I remember being asked like about my personal experiences. So they did ask me, they had reviewed my application there. That could have changed. Like I said, I'm an old lady these days. I graduated 7 years ago. But either way, that was my experience there. It was great. They were very kind. I had a good experience there. Virginia, Maryland, stressful but good. They do have service dogs they bring you, so you can pet your Labradors before you go in. But the MMI format, just kind of like what we talked about, was there. A very good friend interviewed at Ohio. They were pretty all business, she said. She got asked a question about that brought up the horse vaccines earlier. She specifically got asked that, and she didn't know the answer, mind you, and she graduated from there. So just to give you a little background, Catherine, you're kind of from the Midwest. Some of these might speak more to you.
Yeah, I did not apply to UPenn, Florida, Long Island, or Ohio, but I can tell you some things about what I do understand from those schools from like helping other candidates and things like that. So I echo everything that Leslie already said about Virginia, Maryland. I don't have anything else to really add on that one. Mississippi State, I did actually interview there myself, and I've had a couple of candidates that have interviewed at Mississippi State. And what I've really just resoundingly heard is also what Leslie said, is that they are a little bit more on the casual side. I hesitate to talk too much about my experience because mine was during COVID time. So my interview was actually virtual, which is like completely different than being in person. But I had a very positive experience interviewing with Mississippi State. They were very nice, very encouraging. You could tell that they like genuinely cared, and they weren't just kind of hitting you with like the blank stare, like, you know, they'd rather be anywhere else type of thing. They were very engaged. And I think that is kind of another job too of you, is to be engaging and, you know, like talk with them as if they're people, not just a wall. And we've talked about that before, but just reiterating that. And then with Ohio, I would also echo what Leslie said. They are very, very businessy. And I know we just spent this entire time saying that you should not prepare for interviews. I will say with Ohio State, they are actually kind of known for picking certain interview questions from kind of like a big subset. I had a very, very good friend who was in state at Ohio State, interviewed there, and she like actually did literally prepare for an interview and used like some of those like interview prep cards, like the Ohio State like deck. You can find them on Quizlet. Like you literally just Google Ohio State vet school interview questions, they'll come up. You don't want to get the canned answers for experience-based questions, but it will give you a good idea of the more type of questions like Leslie mentioned, like the horse vaccine questions. They're more likely to ask the more probing business, professional, current event type questions. So that is the one that I would be a little bit more weary on, like actually preparing for.
And I'd love to hop in. I just put it in the chat, but I thought I would echo it verbally as well. We have a ton of interview resources on our website as well, including school-specific ones. So please definitely reach out if you're interested. I'll make sure we link a few on the post-webinar email with this recording. But if there's anything else that we can send you, please don't hesitate to just respond to the email that you'll be getting. And someone from our team will definitely get back to you. I actually don't see any questions in the chat, so I think this is a really great time to wrap up tonight's conversation. Leslie, Catherine, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise to our wonderful audience. We appreciate you being here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, whether that's booking a one-on-one consultation or getting back to us through our emails. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck. Bye, guys.